When they laughed at me at the dinner table, they didn't know that the medal I kept hidden beneath my collar carried secrets powerful enough to bring down every hypocrite in that room. And the moment the captain walked in and addressed me as Major General, every mask began to fall. My name is Charlotte Harlow. I spent 25 years of my life serving in the United States Army, rising through ranks that most people couldn't even pronounce correctly. I've commanded battalions in the scorching deserts of Iraq, coordinated intelligence operations in the frozen mountains of Afghanistan, and made decisions that saved thousands of lives while haunting my dreams. But sitting at my mother's 60th birthday dinner in Claiborne, my hometown that time forgot, you'd think I was nothing more than the family disappointment who'd finally come crawling back home. The restaurant was one of those places that tried too hard to be sophisticated for a small town. Crystal chandeliers hung from exposed wooden beams, and the waiters wore bow ties that looked like they'd strangle them at any moment. My family had reserved the private dining room, which meant I couldn't escape even if I wanted to. I arrived precisely at 7, a habit drilled into me by decades of military precision. The hostess, a young woman who couldn't have been older than 20, led me through the main dining area. I could feel eyes on me as I walked past the other patrons. Not recognition, just the casual assessment people give to strangers. My civilian clothes felt foreign on my body. The silk blouse and tailored pants a poor substitute for the uniform I'd worn like a second skin. The private room buzzed with conversation that died the moment I stepped through the doorway. My mother, Margaret, sat at the head of the table, her silver hair perfectly coiffed, wearing the pearls my father had given her for their 30th anniversary. She glanced at me, then quickly looked away, as if I were a servant who'd entered at an inconvenient time. My father, Harvey, at least had the decency to nod in my direction. He'd aged in the 3 years since I'd last seen him. His bookshop owner's stoop had become more pronounced, and his hands trembled slightly as he reached for his wine glass. But it was my sister Vivian who commanded the room's attention, holding court in a crimson dress that probably cost more than most people in Claiborne made in a month. "Charlotte," Vivian said, drawing out my name like she was tasting something unpleasant. "We weren't sure you'd make it." I moved toward the only empty chair, positioned conspicuously near the kitchen door. As I sat down, I heard someone whisper, though not quietly enough, "That's the one who got discharged, right?" Discharged. As if my retirement after 25 years of distinguished service was something shameful. As if choosing to leave rather than compromise my integrity was a failure. I straightened my spine, a reflex that would never leave me, and reached for the water glass in front of me. "So," Vivian continued, her voice carrying that false sweetness that had fooled everyone but me since we were children. "What are you doing now? I heard the job market is tough for people in transition." The table tittered with nervous laughter. My mother's cousin Linda, who'd always been eager to please whoever held the most social capital, chimed in. "My nephew Todd is hiring at his security firm. I'm sure he could find something for you. The night shift at the mall isn't too demanding." I took a sip of water, letting the ice clink against my teeth. "I'm taking some time to consider my options." "Options," Vivian repeated, making the word sound like a disease. "That's what we're calling unemployment now." More laughter. Even my mother cracked a smile, though she still wouldn't meet my eyes. I wondered what stories Vivian had been telling them, what narrative she'd crafted to explain why Charlotte, who'd once been the family's golden child, had returned home without fanfare or fortune. The waiter appeared, a gangly young man who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. As he took our orders, I noticed Vivian's assistant, a severe-looking woman named Patricia, whispering urgently in her ear. Vivian waved her away with the irritation of someone used to having subordinates. "The Bright New Day Foundation is expanding," Vivian announced once the waiter left. "We're opening 3 new chapters across the state. The governor himself attended our last fundraiser." "How wonderful." Our great-aunt Meredith cooed. She was the only one who'd bothered to greet me properly when I'd arrived, though even her kindness felt perfunctory. "You must be so proud, Margaret. Both your daughters serving their country in their own ways." I nearly choked on my water. Serving their country, Vivian had never served anything but her own ambition. But I held my tongue. A skill I'd perfected during countless military briefings where speaking the truth would have ended careers. Yes, my mother finally spoke, her voice carefully modulated. Vivian has done such important work. Her foundation has helped so many veterans. The irony wasn't lost on me. Here I sat, an actual veteran, while my sister played dress-up with borrowed valor. But pointing that out would only make me look petty. So I smiled and nodded, playing the role of the gracious failure. The appetizers arrived, tiny portions on enormous plates. As we ate, the conversation flowed around me like water around a stone. Stock portfolios, vacation homes, children's achievements at expensive private schools. A world I'd never been part of, even before I'd chosen the military. When I was commanding operations that would never make the newspapers, they were comparing kitchen renovations. "Charlotte," my father's friend George said suddenly, "I have to ask. All those years in the army, what exactly did you do? Liz here thinks you were some kind of secretary." His wife elbowed him, but the damage was done. Everyone turned to look at me, their faces wearing expressions of polite curiosity mixed with schadenfreude. "I coordinated logistics," I said simply. It wasn't a lie. Coordinating logistics was part of what I did. The fact that those logistics involved moving special operations teams through hostile territory, or ensuring supply lines held during siege conditions, didn't need to be mentioned. "See," Liz said triumphantly, "I told you, office work." "Important office work, I'm sure," Vivian added with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Someone has to make sure the real heroes have their paperwork in order." The table laughed again. I noticed my mother had finally looked at me, and there was something in her expression I couldn't quite read. Disappointment, embarrassment, or was it something else? "Speaking of heroes," Vivian continued, reaching for her wine glass, "we're honoring several at next week's gala. Real combat veterans who've made tremendous sacrifices. Not everyone who serves sees actual action. Of course, some people spend their entire careers behind desks, filling out forms." She was baiting me, and everyone at the table knew it. But I'd faced down insurgents with automatic weapons and government officials with hidden agendas. My little sister's barbs were nothing compared to that. "You're right," I said evenly. "Not everyone sees combat. It's probably for the best. Violence changes people in ways that can't be undone." Something in my tone must have carried more weight than I'd intended, because the table fell silent for a moment. Then Vivian laughed, a bright, brittle sound. "How dramatic. You always did have a flair for the theatrical, Charlotte. Remember when you used to play soldier in the backyard? I guess some people never grow out of it." "I remember," I said. "You used to beg me to let you be the general." Her smile tightened. "Well, we all have our childhood fantasies. Some of us just learn to pursue more realistic goals." The main course arrived then, saving us from further sparring. The fish was overcooked, the vegetables limp, but everyone proclaimed it delicious. I ate mechanically, years of MREs and mess hall food having long ago killed any refined palate I might have developed. As the meal progressed, I found myself studying my family like I'd once studied satellite images of enemy positions. When had they become strangers to me? Or had they always been strangers, and I'd simply been too young and hopeful to notice? My mother, who'd once waited by the phone for my calls from basic training, now acted like I was a casual acquaintance. My father, who'd driven me to the recruitment office despite my mother's tears, seemed to have forgotten that pride he'd shown. And Vivian, who'd cried when I'd left for my first deployment, had transformed into this creature of calculated cruelty. "Charlotte hasn't told you all the best part," Vivian said suddenly, her voice cutting through a discussion about mortgage rates. "She didn't retire from the army. She was asked to leave." The words hung in the air like smoke from a fired weapon. Everyone turned to stare at me, their faces a mixture of shock and delicious scandal. "Vivian," my mother said sharply, the first time she'd shown any emotion all evening. "What? It's not a secret, is it? Charlotte." Vivian's eyes glittered with malice. Tell them why you really left. Tell them about the investigation. I set down my fork carefully. Precisely. The way I'd learned to control every movement in situations where one wrong gesture could mean death. There was no investigation. Of course not, Vivian said. They hushed it all up, but we know the truth, don't we? About the missing funds, the questionable decisions, the reason they couldn't wait to see you gone. The lies came so easily to her, delivered with such conviction that I saw doubt creeping into the faces around the table. Even my father looked uncertain. I retired, I said calmly. With full honors and commendations. My service record is public information for anyone who cares to look. Public information can be sanitized, Vivian countered. We all know how the military protects its own, until they don't. I could have defended myself. I could have told them about the Bronze Star, the Meritorious Service Medal, the Legion of Merit. I could have explained that I'd left because I'd refused to sign off on a weapons contract that stank of corruption, that my integrity had cost me a potential 4th star, but left me able to sleep at night. But looking at their faces, eager for scandal and ready to believe the worst, I knew it wouldn't matter. You're right, I said instead. The military does protect its own, until they don't. Vivian's triumphant smile made me want to upend the table, but I'd learned patience in places where impatience meant death. I would not give her the satisfaction of seeing me break. The conversation resumed, though now with an undercurrent of excitement. Nothing quite like a family scandal to liven up a birthday dinner. I became invisible again, which suited me fine. I'd spent years learning how to blend into the background when necessary, how to observe without being observed. As the cake was being brought out, 60 candles flickering like a small fire. The dining room door opened. I didn't turn to look at first, assuming it was another waiter. But the sudden silence made me glance up. Captain Aaron Black stood in the doorway, and time seemed to fold in on itself. He was older now, gray threading through hair that had once been midnight black, lines carved deep around eyes that had seen too much. But his bearing was unmistakable, the ramrod straight posture of a career soldier who'd never learned how to fully relax. He wore civilian clothes, but he might as well have been in full-dress uniform for the way he commanded the room. His gaze swept across the table, taking in the scene with the tactical assessment that becomes instinct, before settling on me. I apologize for the interruption, he said, his voice carrying the same authority I remembered from countless briefings. I was told I might find Major General Harlow here. The silence that followed was absolute. I saw Vivian's mouth open and close like a landed fish. My mother's hand went to her pearls. My father's wine glass tilted dangerously. Aaron, I said, standing because some protocols transcend retirement. What are you doing here? He crossed the room with purposeful strides, stopping at a respectful distance. I was in the area for a conference, thought I'd pay my respects. He paused, and something in his expression softened. It's been too long, General. I'm retired, I reminded him. It's just Charlotte now. With respect, ma'am, you'll always be General Harlow to those of us who served under you. He turned to the table, taking in their shocked faces with what might have been amusement. I apologize for interrupting your celebration. I didn't realize. This is my mother's birthday dinner, I said. Mother, this is Captain Aaron Black. We served together in Afghanistan. My mother managed a weak nod. Vivian looked like she'd swallowed something poisonous. Captain George said, finding his voice. But you called her. Major General. Aaron confirmed. 2 stars. Would have been 3 if she hadn't chosen integrity over politics. He looked at me meaningfully. Some of us haven't forgotten. You're being dramatic, I said, but I couldn't help the small smile that tugged at my lips. Am I? Do you know what happened after you left? He turned back to the table, addressing them like they were new recruits. That weapons contract she refused to sign 3 congressional investigations later, and half the procurement office is under indictment. She saw what the rest of us were too blind or too afraid to notice. Aaron, I warned. They should know, he insisted. Your family should know who you are, what you've done, the lives you've saved, the sacrifices you've made. It doesn't matter, I said quietly. It does matter. His voice carried the same passion I remembered from the night he'd disobeyed orders to evacuate civilians from a village marked for an airstrike. The night I'd risked my career to protect him from the consequences. You want to know what your daughter did? Your sister. She held the line in Kandahar for 72 hours with half a battalion and no air support. She personally led the convoy that evacuated an orphanage under heavy fire. She has a Purple Heart she never talks about from the shrapnel she took pulling a wounded soldier to safety. Stop, I said, more firmly this time. But he wasn't done. She revolutionized intelligence gathering protocols that are still classified. She built relationships with local leaders that prevented more bloodshed than any weapon could have. She stood up to a 4-star general who wanted to carpet bomb a village to get one target. And she was right, every single time. The cake sat forgotten, candles dripping wax onto pristine frosting. My family stared at Aaron like he was speaking a foreign language, which, in a way, he was. The language of service, of sacrifice, of honor that transcends personal gain. I think you should leave, Vivian said, her voice shrill. This is a private family gathering. Aaron looked at her with the same expression he'd worn when examining unexploded ordnance. Careful, calculating, recognizing danger. Of course, I didn't mean to intrude. He turned back to me. General, if you have time tomorrow, I'd be honored to buy you coffee. There are some people who'd like to thank you properly for what you did for us. I'll think about it, I said. He nodded, snapped to attention, and rendered a salute that would have made a drill sergeant weep with joy. I returned it automatically, muscle memory overriding the awkwardness of the situation. Ma'am, he said, then turned on his heel and left with military precision. The silence that followed his departure was deafening. I remained standing, watching the doorway, before slowly sinking back into my chair. Well, Linda said faintly, that was unexpected. Major General, George repeated, like he was testing the words. 2 stars. Almost 3, his wife added, wonder in her voice. I picked up my water glass, found it empty, and set it down again. The cake continued its slow melt, forgotten centerpiece to a ruined celebration. Charlotte, my mother said, and for the first time all evening, she was looking directly at me. Is it true what he said? Does it matter? I asked, genuinely curious. Would it change anything if it were? Of course it would matter, my father said, his voice stronger than I'd heard it all night. My God, Charlotte, why didn't you tell us? I laughed, a short, bitter sound. Tell you what, that I spent 25 years doing things I can't talk about in places I'm not allowed to name. That I have medals I keep in a safe deposit box because wearing them feels like bragging about surviving when others didn't. That I left because I wouldn't sign a piece of paper that would have made me complicit in theft and maybe murder. You could have explained, my mother insisted. We would have understood. Would you? When was the last time any of you asked me about my service? When was the last time you showed any interest beyond assuming I was a secretary in uniform? That's not fair, Vivian interjected, but her protest lacked its earlier venom. Isn't it you just told everyone I was drummed out in disgrace? You made up lies about investigations and missing funds. Why? Vivian. What possible reason could you have for trying to destroy my reputation? She lifted her chin, defiance replacing uncertainty. I didn't make anything up. I heard rumors, people talk. What people name one person who told you I was under investigation? She opened her mouth, closed it, then opened it again. It doesn't matter. The point is, you come back here acting all mysterious and superior, like you're too good for us. I came back for Mom's birthday, I said evenly. I sat here and let you insult me, belittle my service, and spread lies about my character. How exactly is that acting superior? You always do this, she snapped. You always have to be the hero, the martyr. Poor Charlotte, so misunderstood, so unappreciated. Maybe if you weren't so sanctimonious all the time, people would actually want you around. The words hung in the air like a toxic cloud. I saw my parents exchange glances, saw the other relatives shift uncomfortably in their seats. This was the heart of it, then. Not that I'd served, not that I'd succeeded, but that I'd done so without seeking their approval or validation. "You're right," I said quietly. "I'm sanctimonious. I do hold myself to standards that make others uncomfortable. I refuse to compromise on things that matter. If that makes me unwelcome here, then I'll leave." I stood, folding my napkin with automatic precision and placing it beside my untouched dessert plate. "Charlotte, don't," my father said. "Please, sit down. Let's talk about this." "There's nothing to talk about," I said. "Vivian has made it clear how the family feels about me. I won't inflict my presence on you any longer." "You're being dramatic," my mother said, but there was a tremor in her voice. "Maybe. Or maybe I'm finally being honest. You want to know the truth, the real truth." I looked around the table, meeting each pair of eyes in turn. I've spent my entire adult life defending people who hate me, protecting freedoms for those who'd spit on me given the chance, and sacrificing everything for a country that measures worth in dollar signs and social media followers. I've held dying soldiers in my arms, written letters to grieving parents, and made decisions that haunt me every single night. And I'd do it all again, because that's what service means. I turned to Vivian, who had gone pale beneath her perfect makeup. "But you wear a uniform. You didn't earn to raise money for a foundation that I'm betting doesn't send nearly as much to veterans as it spends on galas and administrative costs. You traded on a legacy you had no right to claim. And you did it while spreading lies about the very person whose service you were exploiting." "That's not," she started, but I cut her off. "I'm done. Done pretending this is a family. Done accepting disrespect disguised as humor. Done being the convenient scapegoat for your insecurities." I picked up my purse, a small leather bag that looked absurdly civilian against my hand. "Happy birthday, Mom. I'm sorry I ruined your party." I walked out before anyone could respond, my footsteps echoing on the hardwood floors. The main dining room was still busy, full of normal people having normal conversations about normal things. None of them looked up as I passed. The night air was cool against my face, carrying the scent of approaching rain. I stood in the parking lot for a moment, breathing deeply, letting the tension bleed out of my shoulders. Somewhere in the distance, a siren wailed. Closer by, a couple laughed as they walked to their car. I'd taken 3 steps toward my rental when I heard footsteps behind me. "Charlotte, wait!" It was my father. He looked older in the harsh lighting of the parking lot, shadows deepening the lines on his face. "Dad, please, just let me go." "I can't." He stopped a few feet away, hands shoved deep in his pockets. "I need to say something." I waited, too tired to argue. "I was proud of you," he said quietly. "When you enlisted, when you got your commission, every promotion, every deployment, every time you called home safe, I was so damn proud I couldn't breathe sometimes." "Then what happened?" I asked, hating how small my voice sounded. He sighed, shoulders sagging. "Vivian happened. She started telling stories. Little things at first, how you'd stopped returning her calls, how you'd missed important events, then bigger things, how you were difficult to work with, how you'd made enemies, how there were whispers about your conduct. And you believed her. I didn't want to. But you were so far away, and she was here. She had details, documents even. She showed us articles about military corruption, asked if we thought you could be involved. She never accused directly, just implied." My mind raced. Documents, articles. What kind of game had my sister been playing? Why, I asked. Why would she do that? "Because she was jealous," he said simply. "She's always been jealous. You got out. You made something of yourself without needing anyone's money or connections. You became somebody important, somebody who mattered, and she couldn't stand it. So she destroyed me in your eyes. She tried, and I let her." His voice broke. I let my daughter poison me against my other daughter because it was easier than admitting I didn't understand your world anymore, that I couldn't protect you from whatever you were facing, that you'd grown beyond needing me. We stood in silence, two people separated by more than just physical distance. I can't fix this tonight, I said finally. Maybe I can't fix it at all. I know. But I needed you to know what that man said in there about who you are, what you've done. I believe him. And I'm sorry it took a stranger to make me see what I should have known all along. He turned to go, then stopped. There's something else, Vivian's foundation. I've been doing some digging since she started it. The numbers don't add up. The stories she tells about where the money goes, they don't match the public records. I think she's using your name, your service, to run some kind of scam. My blood ran cold. What kind of scam? I don't know. I'm just an old man who runs a bookshop. But I know enough about numbers to know when they don't make sense. And hers don't make sense. He walked away then, leaving me alone with my thoughts and the growing certainty that my evening was far from over. I sat in my rental car for a long time, engine off, watching the restaurant's windows glow warmly in the darkness. Part of me wanted to drive away, to return to the small apartment I'd rented on the other side of town and pretend this night had never happened. But the soldier in me, the part that had learned to recognize enemy action even when it came disguised as friendly fire, wouldn't let me go. Vivian had played a long game. Destroying my reputation within the family hadn't been an impulse or a moment of spite. It had been a campaign, carefully orchestrated and executed with precision. The question was why? Simple jealousy didn't explain the documents my father had mentioned, or the elaborate lies about investigations. I started the engine and pulled out of the parking lot, but instead of heading to my apartment, I turned toward downtown. The Bright New Day Foundation had offices in a converted Victorian near the courthouse. I'd driven past it earlier in the week, noting the expensive renovation and prime location. Property like that didn't come cheap in Claiborne. The building was dark when I arrived, which I'd expected. What I hadn't expected was to see a light on in the corner office on the second floor. Vivian's office, if the gilt lettering on the window was any indication. I parked across the street and settled in to wait. Surveillance was another skill that never left you. The ability to remain still and alert while time crawled by. I'd spent longer nights in worse conditions watching more dangerous targets. An hour passed before a car pulled into the building's small lot. A Mercedes, new and gleaming even in the dim streetlight. Patricia, Vivian's assistant, got out and hurried inside. Interesting. What required the attention of an assistant at nearly midnight on a Saturday? 20 minutes later, another car arrived. This one I didn't recognize. A dark sedan with tinted windows. Two men emerged, both wearing suits that screamed federal agency. They didn't hurry, moving with the casual confidence of people who expected doors to open for them. My instincts, honed by years of threat assessment, started screaming. Federal agents didn't make social calls to small-town charity offices at midnight. Either Vivian was in more trouble than I'd imagined, or she was into something far more complex than simple fraud. I reached for my phone, then hesitated. Who would I call? The local police? With what evidence? My military contacts. This wasn't their jurisdiction or their concern. Aaron? I didn't even have his current number. The decision was made for me when my phone buzzed with an incoming text from an unknown number. General Harlow, this is Aaron. Are you free to talk? There's something you need to know about your sister's foundation. I stared at the message, then at the building where shadows moved behind curtained windows. Then I typed back a single word. Yes. My phone rang immediately. Charlotte, Aaron's voice was tense. Where are you right now? Outside the Bright New Day Foundation offices, watching what looks like federal agents meet with my sister's assistant. There was a pause. You always did have good instincts. Listen, I wasn't entirely honest earlier. I'm not here for a conference. I'm here because your name came up in a terrorism financing investigation. The words hit like a physical blow. What? Not as a suspect, he added quickly. As a victim. Someone's been using your service record, your commendations, even your classified operations history to legitimize fraudulent veteran charities. Charities that funnel money to some very bad people. I closed my eyes, pieces clicking into place with sickening clarity. Vivian, we think so, but we need proof. The agents you're watching are probably Treasury Department. They've been building a case. But your sister is smart. She's kept enough distance between herself and the dirty money to maintain plausible deniability. What do you need from me? Nothing. Stay away. Let the professionals handle it. I just wanted to warn you before my name ends up in headlines next to the word terrorism. I finished. Too late for staying away. Aaron, I'm already here. Charlotte, don't. I ended the call and got out of the car. Some battles you couldn't fight from a distance. Some enemies required close engagement. The front door was locked, but that was hardly an obstacle for someone who'd breached significantly more secure facilities. The lock was civilian grade. The alarm system the kind that gave you 30 seconds to enter a code. I had the door open in 15 seconds and the alarm disabled in 20 more. Vivian had never changed her passwords, still using our childhood address. The building was silent except for the murmur of voices from upstairs. I moved through the darkness with practiced ease, avoiding the squeaky board I'd noticed during my earlier reconnaissance, keeping to the edges of the stairs where they were less likely to creak. The voices became clearer as I approached Vivian's office. You need to understand the seriousness of the situation. A man was saying, we have transaction records, overseas communications, witness testimony. Your employer is looking at 25 to life unless she cooperates fully. I don't know what you're talking about, Patricia replied, but her voice shook. The foundation is legitimate. We help veterans. You help veterans disappear money. Another voice said, very specific veterans. Ones with skills certain organizations find valuable. Ones who need new identities and funding to carry out operations on American soil. My blood ran cold. This wasn't just fraud. This wasn't even simple terrorism financing. This was treason. I want a lawyer, Patricia said. You'll get one. But right now, we're offering you a chance to help yourself. Tell us about Charlotte Harlow's involvement. She's not involved, Patricia said quickly. Too quickly. Vivian hates her sister. She'd never trust her with anything important. Yet she uses her sister's military record in every fundraising document. Her sister's face is on your website. Her sister's classified service history somehow made it into your grant applications. Vivian said Charlotte gave her permission, said they'd reconciled, that Charlotte supported the foundation's work. Do you have any documentation of this permission? Any emails, letters, recordings? Silence. I thought not. Here's what we think happened. Vivian Harlow discovered her sister had access to classified databases during her service. Maybe Charlotte mentioned it in passing. Maybe Vivian figured it out on her own. She used that access, probably through stolen credentials, to identify vulnerable veterans. Ones with special forces training, ones with grudges, ones who could be turned. That's insane, Patricia protested, but she sounded less certain now. Is it we've tracked 17 veterans who received grants from your foundation? All 17 disappeared within 6 months. 5 have been positively identified participating in domestic terror attacks. 3 more are on international watch lists. The others are ghosts. But ghosts with $100,000 deposits from accounts traced back to this office. I'd heard enough. I retreated down the stairs, my mind racing. Vivian hadn't just destroyed my reputation out of spite. She'd done it to cover her tracks, to ensure that if anyone started investigating, I'd look like the guilty party. The disgraced officer with the mysterious past and the axe to grind. Outside, I called Aaron back. They're building a case against Vivian for terrorism financing, I said without preamble. But they think I might be involved. I know. That's why I'm here, to make sure your name stays clear. It won't. Not if Vivian's been using my classified history. There's going to be an investigation into how she got that information. They'll assume I gave it to her. Did you? Of course not, but I can't prove a negative. Then we need to find proof of what really happened. Charlotte, Is there any way Vivian could have accessed your personal files? Did you ever leave classified materials where she could find them? I thought back through the years, trying to remember every leave, every visit home, every time Vivian and I had been in the same space, and then it hit me. 5 years ago, I said slowly, I was home for Dad's surgery. I had my laptop with me, my military laptop. I thought I'd secured it. But Vivian was house-sitting for me while I was deployed. She had keys to my apartment. That's means and opportunity. We need to establish motive beyond simple fraud. I might have something, I said, remembering my father's words. Dad said Vivian showed him documents about military corruption, articles that implicated me. If she kept copies, it would show premeditation, a deliberate campaign to discredit you in case her activities were discovered. Aaron paused. Where would she keep something like that? I knew my sister. She was paranoid about digital security but cavalier about physical documents. Her home office. She has a safe where she keeps what she calls her insurance policies. Charlotte, no, whatever you're thinking. I'm thinking that federal agents are about to arrest my sister's assistant, which means Vivian is going to run. She's probably already packing. If we're going to find evidence, it has to be now. We need to do this legally. Let me contact. By the time you get a warrant, she'll be gone and the documents will be ash. I'm not letting her destroy my life to save her own. I ended the call again and drove toward Vivian's house, a sprawling colonial in the best part of town. The kinds of house honest charity work didn't buy. The house was lit up like a Christmas tree, every window blazing. Through the front window, I could see Vivian throwing things into boxes with frantic energy. She'd changed out of her red dress into jeans and a sweater. Her hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. For a moment, she looked like the little sister I remembered, the one who'd cried when I left for basic training. Then she turned, and I saw her face. No tears, no panic, just cold calculation as she sorted through papers, some going into boxes, others into a shredder that ran continuously. I didn't bother with subtlety this time. I rang the doorbell. The shredder stopped. Through the window, I saw Vivian freeze, then cautiously approach the door. She peered through the peephole, and I heard her sharp intake of breath. Go away, Charlotte, she called through the door. Open the door, Vivian. We need to talk. There's nothing to talk about. You should leave. Now. I know about the foundation, about the veterans you've been recruiting, about the money. Silence. Then the sound of locks turning. The door opened a crack, held by a security chain. You don't know anything, she said, but her eyes darted nervously past me, checking the street. I know federal agents are at your office right now. I know Patricia is probably cutting a deal. I know you've been using my service record to legitimize a terrorism financing operation. Her face went pale. You're lying. Call Patricia if you don't believe me. Oh wait, you can't. She's in custody. The door slammed shut. I heard footsteps running, the shredder starting up again with renewed urgency. I tested the door. Solid wood, reinforced frame. But the window next to it was just glass. I picked up one of Vivian's decorative garden rocks and threw it through the window. The alarm started shrieking, but I was already reaching through to unlock the door from the inside. Vivian stood in her office doorway, feeding papers into the shredder as fast as it would take them. When she saw me, she grabbed a letter opener from her desk. Stay back, she warned, brandishing the tiny blade. Put it down, Vivian. You're not going to stab me. You don't know what I'm capable of. Actually, I do. That's the problem. I advanced slowly, hands visible, but ready. You're capable of destroying your own sister's reputation to cover your crimes. You're capable of sending damaged veterans to their deaths for money. You're capable of treason. Treason. She laughed, high and hysterical. I'm a patriot. I'm funding the real heroes, the ones willing to do what needs to be done to save this country from itself. You're funding terrorists. Freedom fighters, veterans who understand that sometimes you have to destroy something to save it. Her eyes glittered with fanatic fervor. You wouldn't understand. You always followed orders, always played by the rules. even when those rules were destroying everything we claimed to stand for. So you decided to fund domestic terrorism, to use my name, my record, to legitimize murder. I used what was available. You were perfect. The mysterious sister with the classified past, the decorated officer who suddenly retired under cloudy circumstances. If anything went wrong, who would they suspect? Not me, the charitable sister trying to help veterans despite her family's military disappointment. The shredder jammed, and she cursed, trying to clear it. I used the distraction to close the distance between us, knocking the letter opener from her hand with a move I'd learned in basic training. It's over, Vivian. She looked at me with pure hatred. It's never over. You think arresting me will stop anything? I'm one person in a network. The veterans I helped, the causes I funded, they'll continue. And your name will be tied to all of it. Maybe, but at least I'll be alive to clear it. Her face changed then, hatred replaced by something worse. Resignation. You always were the smart one. She lunged for her desk drawer. I moved to stop her, but I wasn't fast enough. Her hand came up holding a small pistol, the kind fashionable women carried for protection. Time slowed, the way it always did in life or death moments. I saw her finger move toward the trigger, saw the barrel swing toward me, calculated angles and distances with the part of my brain that never stopped being a soldier. I moved, not away but toward her, inside the arc of the gun. My hand closed on her wrist, forcing the barrel up and away. The gun fired, deafeningly loud in the small room, plaster raining from the ceiling. We struggled for control of the weapon. Vivian was stronger than she looked, desperation lending her strength. But I had 25 years of combat training and muscle memory that kicked in without conscious thought. The gun fired again, this time into the bookshelf. Then I had control, twisting the weapon from her grip and stepping back, keeping it trained on her. On the ground, I ordered, hands where I can see them. She collapsed more than complied, folding in on herself like a broken doll. You've ruined everything, she whispered. Everything I built, everything I worked for. You ruined it yourself the moment you decided to use our family, our service, for this. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. Someone had reported the gunshots or the alarm. Either way, our time was running out. There's a safe, I said, behind the painting. Open it. She looked up at me with tear-streaked face. No! I chambered around, the sound sharp in the sudden silence. I wouldn't shoot her. We both knew that. But she was scared enough not to test me. The combination is your birthday, she said bitterly. I always was too sentimental. I kept the gun on her while I opened the safe one-handed. Inside were stacks of documents, USB drives, and cash, lots of cash. Insurance, I asked. Leverage, she corrected. Names, dates, transactions, everything I needed to keep myself safe. Including documents about me. She smiled then, a twisted expression that bore no resemblance to joy. Especially about you, every mission you never talked about, every operation that didn't officially exist. Did you know you're mentioned in classified reports from 6 different countries, the Ghost General? They called you in Syria, the woman who could topple governments with a whisper. How did you access your files? She laughed. I didn't have to. Do you know how many bitter veterans there are? How many people with clearances who need money? I just had to ask the right questions, pay the right people. Your whole career, purchased one document at a time. The sirens were right outside now. Red and blue lights painted the walls through the broken window. Why? I asked. The question that had haunted me all night. Why go to all this trouble? Why not just run your fake charity and disappear? Because I hated you, she said simply. I've always hated you. Perfect Charlotte, brave Charlotte, honorable Charlotte. Do you know what it's like growing up in the shadow of a hero? To have every accomplishment compared to your sister's classified achievements. To know that no matter what you did, you'd never measure up. So you decided to destroy me. I decided to become you, or better than you. To take everything that made you special and use it for something that mattered. And I succeeded. For 5 years, I was the Harlow sister people respected, the one making a difference, the one who mattered. Police open up. I looked at my sister, crumpled on the floor of her expensive office, surrounded by the debris of her crimes. Part of me pitied her. The little girl who'd begged to play general had gotten her wish in the worst possible way. "Charlotte Harlow," I called out. "I'm putting the weapon down and coming out." I set the pistol on the desk and walked to the front door, hands visible, movements slow and deliberate. The police swarmed in, weapons drawn, shouting commands. I complied with practiced ease, letting them cuff me, letting them secure the scene. "There's a federal investigation," I said to the officer who seemed to be in charge. "Treasury agents at the Bright New Day Foundation. My sister inside is Vivian Harlow. She's the primary suspect." He looked skeptical, but he made the call. Within minutes, the house was swarming with federal agents, including the two I'd seen at the office. They looked at me with professional interest. "General Harlow," one said, "we've been looking for you. I imagine you have questions." "Several. Starting with how you happened to be at your sister's house with a recently fired weapon." I smiled tightly. "Would you believe me if I said it was a family dispute?" They took me to the federal building for questioning. Not under arrest, they assured me, but as a witness. Aaron was there, somehow, badge out and expression grim. "I vouched for General Harlow," he told the agents. "She's been instrumental in uncovering this network." "Instrumental in contaminating a crime scene, you mean?" One agent muttered. But they listened as I told my story. About the dinner, the lies, the discovery of what Vivian had been doing. I turned over the documents from her safe, watched their eyes widen as they realized the scope of what she'd collected. "This is..." One agent trailed off, flipping through pages. "This is beyond what we expected. She has operational details for missions that don't officially exist. Purchased from people with clearances and grudges," I said. "She told me as much." "We'll need a full debrief. Every mission mentioned here, every operation that might have been compromised." I nodded. It would take weeks, maybe months, to untangle the web Vivian had woven. But at least my part in it was clear. The victim, not the perpetrator. They released me as dawn broke over Claiborne. Aaron drove me back to my rental car, still parked outside Vivian's house. Crime scene tape fluttered in the morning breeze. "Thank you," I said, "for believing me, for being there." "I never doubted you," he said simply. "The General Harlow I knew would never betray her country. When your name came up in the investigation, I knew something was wrong." "What happens now?" "Vivian will be charged with multiple federal crimes: terrorism financing, identity theft, conspiracy, probably treason if they can make it stick. The veterans she recruited will be hunted down. The money will be traced. It'll be messy and public." "And my reputation?" He sighed. "That's harder to fix. The truth will come out. But you know how these things go. Some people will always wonder if you were involved." I thought about my family, about the looks on their faces when Aaron had revealed who I really was. Would they believe I was innocent? Would it matter if they did? "I need to see my parents," I said. "Charlotte." "They need to hear it from me. What Vivian did, why she did it. They deserve that much." He nodded. "Do you want backup?" I almost smiled. I think I can handle my parents without tactical support. But when I arrived at my childhood home, I found I wasn't the only visitor. Cars lined the usually empty street, and through the window, I could see my extended family gathered in the living room. News traveled fast in small towns. I parked and sat for a moment, gathering courage I'd never needed in combat. Then I walked to the front door and knocked. My father answered, looking haggard. His eyes widened when he saw me. "Charlotte, we heard..." "The police were here. They said Vivian..." "Can I come in?" He stepped aside wordlessly. The living room fell silent as I entered. My mother sat on the couch, still in her birthday dress, makeup smeared from crying. The rest of the family clustered around her like a protective wall. You did this, Linda accused. You destroyed her. No, I said quietly. Vivian destroyed herself. I just stopped her from taking me down with her. She's your sister, my mother said, her voice broken. How could she? I countered. Do you understand what she's accused of? She funded terrorism. Mom. She sent veterans to kill Americans. She used my name, my service record, to legitimize murder. That's impossible, George protested. Vivian runs a charity. She helps people. She helped people disappear. She helped them get weapons and funding. She helped them plan attacks on American soil. I looked at each of them in turn. 5 of the veterans she funded have been linked to domestic terror attacks. 17 more are missing. How many people died because of her charity? You're lying, my mother said, but doubt crept into her voice. The federal agents who arrested her aren't lying. The evidence isn't lying. The only one who's been lying is Vivian. For years. Why, my father asked. Why would she do this? Because she hated me, I said simply. Because she couldn't stand living in my shadow. So she decided to use that shadow for her own purposes. And when it all started falling apart, she made sure I'd take the blame. I told them everything. The forged documents, the stolen classified information, the elaborate campaign to discredit me. I watched their faces change from disbelief to horror to something worse, recognition. The documents, my father said slowly, the ones she showed me about you, they never made sense, but they looked so official. All lies, I confirmed. Designed to make you doubt me, to ensure that if anyone came asking questions, you'd point them in my direction. We did, my mother whispered. When those men came by last week, asking about you, we told them. Oh God, we told them you'd been acting strangely, that you'd been discharged under suspicious circumstances. We confirmed everything Vivian had been saying. So that's why the federal agents had been looking for me. My own family had inadvertently supported Vivian's narrative. It's not your fault, I said, meaning it. She played you perfectly. She knew exactly which buttons to push, which fears to exploit. You believed her because she was your daughter, and she was here. I was just the ghost who called on holidays. Don't, my mother said sharply. Don't you dare forgive us. We chose to believe lies about you. We chose to think the worst. We failed you as parents, as family. Don't make excuses for us. The room fell silent. I saw Linda crying quietly in the corner, George staring at his hands, the others avoiding eye contact. The weight of collective guilt hung heavy in the air. What happens now? My father asked. Vivian will stand trial. The investigation will be thorough and public. Our name will be in the news for all the wrong reasons. You'll probably face scrutiny too. Questions about what you knew and when. It won't be pleasant. And you? I shrugged. I'll cooperate with the investigation. Clear my name as much as possible. Then, I don't know, find somewhere new to start over, I suppose. You could stay here, my mother offered tentatively. We could face this together, as a family. I looked at her, at all of them, and felt nothing but exhaustion. We haven't been a family for years. Vivian made sure of that. I can't just pretend the last 5 years didn't happen. We're not asking you to pretend, my father said. We're asking for a chance to make amends, to rebuild what Vivian destroyed. Some things can't be rebuilt, I said gently. Sometimes the damage is too extensive, the foundation too compromised. Sometimes the kindest thing is to clear the ground and start fresh. I turned to leave, then stopped. There was one more thing that needed to be said. I loved her, I said, not turning around. Despite everything, she was my little sister and I loved her. I need you to know that. What I did tonight wasn't revenge, it was survival. I walked out of my childhood home for what I knew would be the last time. Behind me, I heard my mother break down completely, my father's voice trying to comfort her, but I didn't look back. I'd learned in the military that sometimes retreat was the only viable strategy. The sun was fully up now, painting Claiborne in shades of gold and amber. The town looked peaceful, unaware that one of its prominent citizens had been exposed as a traitor. By evening, the news would break. By tomorrow, reporters would descend like vultures. But I wouldn't be here to see it. I had testimony to give, truth to tell, a name to clear. And after that, a life to rebuild from the ashes of family betrayal. I got in my car and drove away from Claiborne, away from the ruins of what had once been home. In my rearview mirror, the town grew smaller and smaller until it disappeared entirely. Like a bad dream, fading in the morning light. My phone rang. "Aaron." "How did it go?" he asked. "About as well as could be expected," I said. "They know the truth now. What they do with it is up to them." "And you?" I considered the question. Who was I now? Without the military to define me. Without a family to anchor me. "I'm okay," I said, surprised to find it was true. "For the first time in a long time, I'm okay." "Good. Because we're going to need your help identifying the veterans Vivian recruited. Your insight could save lives." "I'll do whatever's necessary," I said. It's what I'd always done. What I'd always be. A soldier, with or without the uniform. A protector, even of those who'd betrayed me. A survivor, no matter the cost. The road stretched out before me, leading away from everything I'd known and toward an uncertain future. But I'd faced uncertainty before, in places far more dangerous than a Virginia highway. I'd survived betrayal, terrorism, and 25 years of war. I could survive this too. My name is Charlotte Harlow, and I am no longer anyone's disappointment, anyone's shadow, anyone's convenient scapegoat. I am simply, finally, myself. And that, it turns out, is enough.